Do you want to make your own toys for your small pets? Today I'll be showing you the types and sizes of various chains and connectors, the backbones of small pet toys. I'll also be showing you some of the ways to use them, along with how and the tools needed. Hi, I'm Suzanne at Jackson Opie's Glider Toy Parts. Join me as I delve into chains and connectors, including types, sizes, uses, tools needed, and techniques. So let's go. So, the first thing you need to know about is chain. There are 3 types of chain sizes that are commonly used for making sugar glider, small bird, and small pet toys. So, the most commonly used type is 3mm, which is what I have here in my hand. 3mm chain refers to the diameter of each link, which is 3mm thick, okay? The links themselves are about 5/8 of an inch long and about 3/8 of an inch wide. So that is the most commonly used size. And you can see here I have a toy that uses the 3mm chain, number one, in connecting to the very top of where the actual toy begins with the hanger, the way that you're going to hang it in the cage. And then also it can be used as danglers and places to hold the various charms that makes the toys pretty. So that's the 3mm chain. The second type is 2mm, and it is smaller. Each link is about 1/2 inch long, and the diameter of the chain is 2mm, so it's much finer chain, but that makes it great for making pulleys on the toys. Now, if you have sugar gliders, you know that sugar gliders love to carry things back to their pouch using their tail. And so a lot of people like to use bangle bracelets to make pulleys for them to do that with. And so the 2mm chain is ideal for that because it slips through the holes of the wiffle ball or whatever part that you're using to make the pulley very easily. So that is 2mm chain. And then the last size that we use is 4mm chain. Now this type of chain is not used as often. It's much larger, as you can see. Each link is about 1 inch long. It's 4mm in diameter. It's about 5/8 of an inch wide. And it's just much heavier duty. So this is great chain for making a heavy toy like this, supporting it. It's also great for bird toys, or if you have chewers that would chew through a thinner link. It would be much more difficult for them to get through this wider, thicker chain than it is through the other 2 sizes. So those would be reasons to use 4mm chain. So you can use a file like this, which is actually very useful also in boring out holes of charms to make them larger. But you can use this for rubbing against that burr. So we have a burr here in the center of this one. And you can use the file going back and forth. You can also use a nail file, works really well for this, until you've eliminated that burr. And that works very nicely, but it's kind of messy because you end up with a lot of plastic dust from that. Another thing that you can use, kind of along the same vein, is a pedicure file that's mechanical. So when you turn that on, the wheel spins. It's got sandpaper on the wheel. And you would simply start at one end of the chain here When I do it, I check every single link. So I start at one end and I just rub each link with my finger until I feel a burr like there is on this one. So then to get rid of that burr, all I do is simply file it with the pedicure file. Got it nice and smooth and no longer have the burr. But again, this is kind of messy because you do have all that plastic dust. The third technique people use is flush cutters. This is my personal favorite because it does the cleanest job of removing those burrs. And it's easy to use both at the ends, which you can't use the pedicure file for the burrs that are in the center, only for the burrs that are on the end. But with the flush cutters, you can do the burrs that are in the center as well as the burrs that are on the ends. So let's just go along here and find the next burr that we need to remove. So it's a pretty good sized burr right here. You can see that right there at the end. It's just kind of poking up a little bit. And you just simply take your flush cutters and chop that little piece off. That simple. Leaves a nice smooth surface. And then if you need to get one out of a center, like this one, has a burr right in the middle, you're going to use the flat side. The flush cutters are bent at a little bit of an angle. So you want the bottom of the angle, or the flat side, to be going towards the chain itself. So since we're removing a burr in the middle, we are going to go right like that. And we got rid of most of it. Now, sometimes you have to do it a couple of times to be able to get it all. But there, now you have a nice smooth inside of that link. And there's just a little bit of burr on the end of this one. I'm going to take that off too. Okay, so the final tool that you can use for deburring your chain is a micro torch. You can get the micro torch at Harbor Freight quite easily, or any other hardware store will carry them. I like the kind that has a base so that I can set it down flat on a tabletop and it will just stand there for me while I'm using it. And so what you're going to do, it is filled with butane lighter fluid. And so you simply pull down the locking mechanism, or the safety catch, depress the trigger, and then on the side there's a little button that you can push in that holds it on. Then place the torch down, like that. And again, starting from one end of the chain and going along, I'm just going to check for burrs. The burr right in the middle of this one, you can see it pretty clearly right there. I'm just going to very carefully melt that burr right off of there. Now, this can get very, very hot, which can do two things. Number one, you can easily melt the chain too much. So you really only want to briefly hold the chain in the flame. Just enough to remove that burr, but not to melt the chain itself. The other thing is that you don't want to touch the chain that you have just burned because it's very hot, and hot plastic can really make your fingers blister. So you want to make sure that you're using safety precautions and not touching the chain that you have just burned off. Now, one thing that I do sometimes if I'm deburring a small length of chain like this, is I'll take a C-clip, place it at each end of the chain, and that gives me something to hold on to while I'm doing the burning. I don't recommend using the torch method for the 2mm chain because it's so thin that it's really, really easy to melt right through the chain. And then you got a chain that you just wasted. So I don't use torches for 2mm chain. I'll show you a minute what I'm talking about. So I have here a piece of 2mm chain. You can see how much smaller the links are compared to the 3mm. I'm going to put a C-clip at the end, which doesn't go through easily because it's thicker than what the opening is of the chain. But I'm going to go along here and find a burr that needs to be removed. There we go. Here's a really good one. We've got a pretty big burr on that one. And so I'm gonna melt it. And that one worked out just fine. But now that plastic is hot, and it could get stuck to the next link if you're not careful, or it could pull it right through, depending on how hot it got. And sometimes, and I'm going to do it on purpose just so you can see, it melts the whole link. You can see how it's disfigured that link. That link is no longer able to be used. So that's why I don't recommend using the torch for 2mm chain. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different kinds of connectors that there are. I already mentioned a C-clip, and what a C-clip is it's a link that has a break halfway down the chain, down the side. Now this comes in several different types. This one is a small malleable C-clip, and what's nice about this kind of C-clip is that you can actually take it and bend it so that you make hooks instead of closed link, and then it easily bends back. So that's a small malleable type. Then there's the traditional type. It's a little bit longer, as you can see. You can hold the two of them up together. It's longer and it's wider, and it's not malleable the way that that one is. So when you go to bend it, it just pops right back into place. So if you're going to bend it, you would need to heat it, which you could easily do in a glass of boiling water, but you have to be very careful that you don't burn yourself in the process. So there's that. And then the third type is the extra thick type of C-clip. Now, these I like to use for hanging the toy in the cage itself because it's really thick. It's 6mm diameter, and it's just so much stronger than the small malleable or even the standard C-clip. However, these are very hard to get a hold of, and I don't carry them in the store at this time. I'm hoping to be able to in the future. But if you order a kit from Jackson Opie's Glider Toy Parts, one of the kits that makes a toy that I've got a tutorial for, then it will come with one of these C-clips for using at the top of your toy. Using C-clips, if you don't want it to be able to be separated by the pet, then you can use a series of what we call link locks. Now, a link lock comes in many different types and shapes and sizes. So these are the longer link locks. They come in both pastels and bright colors. There are shorter link locks, which also come in pastels or brights. There are candy link locks. They're shaped like a little wrapped candy, and they have a nice big hole in the center to go around the end to put onto your C-clip. And then there are spiral link locks, which again have a nice big hole that can go around your C-clip. So how you use those is very simple. You simply take your C-clip, I'm going to use the long and bright one first. And we're going to slide it on to one end of the C-clip. I'm going to pull back on the head of the C-clip, press it, put the end into the opposite end of the link lock, and then push it down, and there you have it. Your C-link is locked. Your glider is not going to be able to pull that out. So that makes it nice and secure. So if you're not using these for the top of your cage, you can use this, and it makes it just nice and strong, and you're not going to risk your glider pulling the toy right out of the link that you're trying to hang it from. The short ones are only about the length of one end of the link. So with those, you actually need to use two, because one still leaves a gap. So with these, I'm going to put one on one end, put the other one on the other end, and then once they're together, yes, there is still a gap there, but it's harder for the chain to be pulled out of it because you've got it nice and snug like that. Now another thing that you can do is use a small one like this, and then at either end use one of your wrapped candy link locks. So this is something that I use in combination quite frequently. So I will slide one piece of candy onto one end, and actually I don't want that on there right now. Then I'll slide the other piece of candy on the other end, like that. And that leaves that gap in the middle still. But then I can put the short link lock over that gap, and it just makes a nice little decorative locked C-clip for you. Then the last type is that barrel, or the coil type. And again, it's kind of short, so you end up, that gap ends up exposed. So again, when I use this type, I always do two against each other like that, because then that's going to keep the chain from being able to come out. The type of connector I'm going to show you is the oval link, as it's called. And so with this type of link, you can, it has a little split in the side, just off center at one of the ends. And that gives you a place to slip it onto your chain. So, piece of chain here, and got one of our oval links. So you would take your link and your chain, and you would hold the chain link that you want to attach it to pretty firmly in your hand. With your other hand, you're going to press that gap over the chain link, and then that connects it. And because that gap is off to the side, you don't have to worry about it getting pulled out of there. Now these are very handy to use for attaching other chains to an initial chain, or frequently this is how I use them, because with this large C-clip, the oval link fits around that C-clip a lot better than what the chain would. The chain itself does not fit over that very easily. See, it doesn't want to go through. And if you push it through, you can make it go through, but then it really splays that chain link, which makes it weaker, so it could end up breaking in time. So I prefer to use an oval link as kind of a go-between for that C-clip. So there's my oval link, and then put it on like that, and just like that. So that is how you use an oval link for that purpose. The other thing that oval links can be used for is for attaching parts to the bottom side of a toy base. And we call these toy bases even though they're at the top, because this is the basis of what your toy is being made from. So in this case, the basis, or the base, is the flowers, the artificial flowers with the panda bear. So if I flip that flower over, you can see that there is an oval link right there, connecting the zip tie that's going through the flower and the panda bear to the next part down on the toy. So another way that you can use those oval links is when you're making your pulleys. So you can slip the oval link onto the bangle, and because it has a nice big hole for the bangle to fit through, the bangle just glides around really nicely, which works really well. And then you can connect the other end of the oval link to a smaller connector and then to the 2mm chain. You don't want to connect that oval link directly to the 2mm chain for the same reason that you don't want to use the thick C-clip on that, on the 3mm chain. I'm just going to show you a minute what happens when you put an oval link onto a 2mm chain. It doesn't want to go. So you have to force it, which again makes it splay out around, and that in time weakens that link and makes a spot where the toy might break. So that's why I don't do that. You're going to want to use a different type of small connector in between. So what type of connector do you use for that? Well, there are several different types available. One of the most popular types is called a mini link, and they come in 3 shapes. They have hearts like this, or ovals, which is like almost like a C-clip by in and of itself because it has that split at the end or on the side. And then the third shape is a star, a 5-pointed star, and it's got a gap right there between 2 of the points of the star. Stars don't work well for going through charms. They work great on chain, but they don't work on charms. The ovals and the hearts, however, work great on both chains and charms. So you can use all 3 types on your toys, just in different ways. So if you're going to attach an oval link to your heart-shaped link, then when you add the chain to the other side of the oval link, or the other side of the mini link, I should say, then that heart ends up sitting sideways, which is fine. It looks great that way. It's just something to be aware of. The oval leaves it hanging nice and straight, though. So a lot of people are going to use the oval for that. Now, I don't recommend using a mini link for connecting a bangle bracelet to a toy to make a pulley, because mini links are actually quite weak. They're not strong at all, and they break quite easily or bend, and then you end up with possible danger for your pet. So you don't want to use mini links on your bangles because they wear out too quickly. So what can you use? Well, I used to recommend using what we called round connectors, and round connectors come in 3 sizes. They come in a very small size. Let's see if I can get a hold of it better. There we go. Very small size like that. Or there's a medium size. And then there's a larger size. Unfortunately, the distributor that we used to get those from no longer is carrying them, and we have not been able to find the manufacturer. So right now we do not have these available any longer, but you may be able to find them from a different vendor. I don't know if anybody still has any left or not, but you can look around and see, because these are really nice and handy to use for attaching charms and also for the bangles on the oval connectors to attach your bracelets to your pulley. So, what do I use now instead of these round connectors? That is the big question. And actually, I like it better than the round connectors, and I'll show you why. So these are called ringtails coil connectors. And so you have this long coil that is made of a corn-based plastic, so it is not harmful in any way to your pet. If your pet were to ingest it, it would be okay. Take this wonky end off of this one. I'm going to use my flush cutters, and I'm just going to clip that end off, make a nice clean end. We have 3 sizes. You have this larger diameter, then there is a mid-sized diameter, and then there is a small diameter. So just like you have for your oval rings, you have 3 sizes of coil connectors. And how you use these is very simple. What you're going to do is cut the coils apart. Now when you cut them, you've got your end of the coil right here. Okay? See that? I don't want to cut it right at that same spot, because if I do, then it leaves a gap like on the round connectors where you could potentially pull the chain, the charm, whatever through. So what I like to do is I like to overlap it by about a 1/4 turn from the end. So we've got the end here, and so if I was going to cut it at the same point, I would cut it here, but I'm going to come around the coil a 1/4 of a turn and cut it there. Now I have an overlap, like a split ring, like you use for necklaces or key rings. So it has an overlap, and so that keeps your charm from falling off, or your bracelet. And then you just simply use your connector. You spread that split, wrap it through, and then it's on there, and it's not going to go anywhere. So that's really, really nice. And you can use all 3 sizes. So now you're probably wondering, why would you need 3 sizes of the coil connectors or the round connectors? And I find that I use them for different purposes. So the smaller ones I use to put directly onto a charm. So I'm going to cut a couple of these for you. I'm going to go that 1/4 wrap and cut it with my flush cutters. Now I have a small connector, which is that 1/4 overlap. That makes it into a split ring. And then I can put my charm into the split, bring it around, and now it is on the charm itself, like that. Now I like these small ones directly on the charms, unless it's a really big charm. So, for example, the aster flowers, there is a hole in them, but it's too small for any of our connectors to go through, and it goes through from end to end. We really don't attach our charms that way. So what I like to do is take one of the largest size and put that directly onto the charm, like that. And then I take a mid-size one to attach the charm to the chain. Now I could attach this directly to the chain as it is, but let me show you what happens when you do that. See how it is not laying flat on the chain? It wants to poke out, and then it just warps your chain, and it just doesn't look very pretty that way. So what I like to do instead is take one of the, for a large connector like this, take one of the middle-sized ones and put it on. And then when I put that onto the chain, now my charm lays flat against the chain. And so it's just much, much prettier that way. And so I always use 2 connectors for attaching my charms, because I want one to go through the charm itself, one to go through the chain itself, and then those 2 attach to each other, and that leaves your charms laying nice and flat. But on a small charm like this, where I'm using a small connector here, again, I'll use a mid-size connector for actually attaching the charm to the chain. So again, I'm doing that quarter overlap. Bring that up and on, and then I'm going to attach this to the same chain, and you can see how it also now, they're both laying flat, and they both have that mid-size that's attaching the charms connector to the chain itself. And so that's how I use the coil connectors. And I really like these because I have the versatility of doing that overlap. It's easier to store because you get a coil that's 12 inches long, and you just cut off what you need as you need it. And so you don't have all these little rings laying around that you have to try and sort through to find the right size and whatever else. So I actually really, really like these coil connectors much better than the round connectors that we were using in the past. So that's how you use those. Okay, so the last type of connector I'm going to show you today is zip ties, or cable ties, as they're sometimes called. And we use 3 different sizes for making sugar glider or small pet toys. There are those that are 4 inches long, like this. There are 6-inch, like this. And then there are 8-inch. Now there are actually 2 different types of 8-inch. There's the type that has the standard locking mechanism on the end of it, and then there's the kind that has the hole as well as the locking mechanism on the end of it. I'll show you why that's really a handy feature to have. So when you're making your toys, sometimes there's not a good connector of any other type to work for the purpose that you need. And that's where your zip ties come in. On this toy, we have this flower up here, this plastic flower that has holes all the way around it. And I used 4-inch zip ties to attach the chains to that flower. So something similar to that I have is, this is a new charm that I have. It has little holes around the sides and one in the center. So what I would do with this is take my chain, just get a smaller length of chain here, and I want it to be really strong. And I could use one of the other kinds of connectors for that, but to connect those. But there's always the danger of it breaking or coming off. And I don't want that because this is a weight-bearing thing. A glider or a small pet is going to be pulling on this. They're going to be hanging on it, climbing on it, whatever. So you want to make sure it's nice and strong. So what I do then is I use a 4-inch zip tie. I go through the chain itself, like that. And then I come through one of the holes on the flower, push the tongue of the zip tie through the locking mechanism, and then I'm going to pull it so that it's snug but not tight, because you want it to have some movement. Now you've got this extra length of the tongue here that you don't want hanging off your toy. So then you're going to take your flush cutters and simply cut that tongue off. You end up with a nice smooth locking mechanism, and you have your chain securely attached to the flower at that point. So that makes it really, really handy. So that's what a 4-inch zip tie is used for. Or other similar applications. Now, 6-inch zip ties are really nice for if you need something a little stronger, or you have something a little bit bigger that you need to go through, then you can use your 6-inch. I really don't use 6-inch a whole lot myself. I typically use either the 4-inch or the 8-inch. Now the 8-inch, I typically use the kind with the hole, and this is why. So if I take this toy again that I've got, at the bottom of the flower, I had a zip tie that went through the flower, through the panda bear, and back down through again. And then I locked it, and I had to attach the oval ring to that part, okay, to that zip tie. So for the 8-inch zip tie, as I said before, you have the kind that does have a hole and the kind that does not. And I'm going to show you what I like to use the one with a hole for. So again, here they are. This one has a hole plus the locking mechanism, and this one has just the locking mechanism. And so a lot of times what I like to use for my toy bases are animals with flowers, like this. And the zip tie is how you attach those to the rest of the toy. So what I have here is a flower and an animal, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So first, I am going to take my artificial flower. I'm going to use my flush cutters and cut that stem off. Then I'm going to take the flower apart, keeping the parts in order. So I've got this plastic cap that I'm going to want to use. And then I've got this other piece that was the center of the flower that the stem goes through. That's trash, so I'm going to throw that out. And then I have all of the petals of the flower. So I'm going to set the petals down a moment, along with my plastic cap. And then I'm going to get my animal ready. So the animal does not have any holes right now. So the way that I'm going to make a hole in it is with my Dremel. And I like to use this engraving bit on the Dremel because I can control the size of the hole better. than with just a regular drill bit. But a drill bit works fine if that's what you prefer. So I'm going to use that Dremel and go right at the center top of the head and drill a hole down into it, just like that. Now it melts that plastic, so I'm going to pull that off of the bit so it doesn't make a problem when I go to the other side, because now I'm going to need a hole at the bottom that's going to correspond with the hole at the top that zip tie can go down through. So now I'm going to go through the center at the bottom. And now I have a hole that goes all the way through. You can see that the hole lines up with the one in the top, because now you can see my hand behind it, just like that. Then you will need to connect it to the chain somehow. So I'm going to use one of those oval links that I showed you earlier. And I'm just going to slip that over the top of the zip tie. And I'm going to take the tongue of the zip tie and bend it around. Bend it around so that it comes on the other side. Then you will need to connect it to the chain somehow. So I'm going to use one of those oval links that I showed you earlier. And I'm just going to slip that over the top of the zip tie. And I'm going to take the tongue of the zip tie and bend it around. Bend it around so that it comes on the other side of that oval link and back through that hole. I'm going to push it through as far as I can, that way, and then I'm going to try to guide it so that zip tie comes out the hole in the bottom. I'm trying to do this kind of backwards because of the video, so I apologize that you're not going to see this very clearly. Okay, there, that second, the end of the tongue came through the bottom hole. Now we want to take that tongue and thread it through the holes in the flower and that green part so that it doesn't go back up into the raccoon. I'm trying to work it through. And so there, I've got it right there. Then I'm going to pull that tongue and I'm going to push this back, the part with the locking mechanism. I'm going to push it so it is flush with the flower, the bottom of the flower again. And then I'm going to ease the loop out of the head. I'm going to ease it further over so that I can pull the tongue tighter down here. And sometimes you have to use pliers to do that, just to get a good enough grip. As you could see, I was really slipping on me quite a lot. So I'm going to take my pliers and pull the tongue. I'm going to hold the locking mechanism in place with my finger, and with my other hand, do this where you guys can see it. My other hand, I am going to pull that tongue through. Okay. So now I have a small loop at the top so that it dangles freely. Okay. I have the locking mechanism with the hole and the tongue of the zip tie all coming through the bottom of the flower. So now I'm going to go ahead and put this zip tie tongue through the locking portion. And I want to pull it till I hear it ratchet. that I know that it's actually locked into place. There it goes. Okay, just like that. So now that tongue came through the locking portion right there. You can see that. There's the tongue. And so I'm going to use my flush cutters to cut that tongue off. That makes a nice flush cut so that it's not going to hurt your glider or your pet. And then here's where that hole comes into play. I'm going to use another oval ring. And I am going to attach it through that hole. So let's see if I can do this such that you guys can see it. So the split of the ring is kind of off center. I'm going to slide it into the hole. And then I'm going to flip it around. And now that is attached there. And now I can attach the rest of my toy to the base and have it not hang wonky. So that is the advantage of the zip ties with holes. And if you don't use a zip tie with a hole, if you use a standard zip tie, which is certainly acceptable, then you just have to remember to put your chain or your link over the tongue before you lock it into place, because it's going to have to be secured in there with the zip tie itself actually being the part that holds it in place. Okay, so that is what we needed to do to use the chains and connectors, the different kinds that are out there. There are other types out there as well, but that gives you a pretty good overview of the different kinds of chain and connectors that are available. And those are really the building blocks or the skeleton of any toy that you're going to make for your sugar glider, ferret, small bird, or whatever. So I hope that helped clear up some confusion for you. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to comment down below. Please subscribe to my channel and then click the little bell next to the subscription box so that you will be notified every time I post a new video. And this is where I am going to now be posting all of the tutorials on how to make actual toys. So I hope to see you again. Comment, subscribe, click the notification box, and please hit like as well. And please share this with your friends all over Facebook or whatever social media you want to use. Share the video and tell them to do the same, because that's what's going to help me be able to bring more and more and more tutorials to you. So thanks again, and you have a great day.